Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's my privilege to introduce John Sauer, my friend, my former colleague, who has been nominated for the position of Solicitor General of the United States. I've known John for years and years now. He is a proud Missourian, going back many generations. John's career has already been incredibly distinguished, and the chairman mentioned some of his accolades. Let me just walk through a few of them, beginning with his education. He's a Bachelor of Science degree from Duke University. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He has an MA from the University of Notre Dame and a JD from Senator Cruz's law school. We'll try not to hold any of that against him.
I apologize for that.
After graduating and completing his education, he clerked for Judge Michael Ludick of the Fourth Circuit, and then for, as the chairman mentioned, for the great Antonin Scalia, who I continue to believe is the most influential Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the 20th century. And he served there with distinction. John then came back to his native St. Louis and was for 5 years a federal prosecutor, where he prosecuted violent crimes, white-collar crimes, and more. And then he briefly, in between that and joining the Missouri Attorney General's office, he founded a small litigation firm where he represented all manner of clients. And then our paths really began to intersect in 2017. I was elected Attorney General of the state of Missouri, and the Missouri Attorney General's office at that time did not have an office of the Solicitor General. And I thought it was important to create one given the volume of appellate cases that we were facing. And I couldn't think of anybody better of all the attorneys that I'd had the privilege of working with than John. So I remember I went to John, and this may say something about my recruiting habits. You'll like this, Senator Kennedy. I went to John and we met at a Cracker Barrel. And we sat down at a Cracker Barrel and over chicken fried steak, I said to him, John, you have the ability and the record to be Solicitor General of the United States, but would you at least consider coming to be Solicitor General of the state of Missouri? And to my great delight, and I think to the great benefit of the state of Missouri, he said yes and served as my Solicitor General for 2 years and also as my first assistant in the office, overseeing all of our criminal and civil litigation, including record numbers of criminal convictions, as well as an astounding win rate in the appellate courts. He's argued multiple times in the federal courts, the United States Supreme Court, of course, the Missouri courts, and handled all of that with the greatest of aplomb and professionalism. He went on to serve for a number of years, another 4 years, I believe, with my successor and now my good friend and colleague, Senator Schmidt, who will say more about that in a moment. But that reminds me, John, here's an opportunity to prepare for your first question. I'll just give it to you now so you can think about it. Which of the attorneys general on this dais was your favorite, and why is it me? So you can be thinking on that. John has served his state with the greatest of distinctions. He has served his country with the greatest of distinctions. I do not know a better lawyer in private practice, in public practice, federal prosecutor, name it, go down the line. I do not know a better lawyer in this country than John Sauer. I'm delighted to see him here today, and I'm delighted to support your nomination. I urge all of my colleagues to do the same. I think maybe I misunderstood this last line of questioning. I thought it sounded to me like my friend Senator Durbin was defending the Korematsu decision, which I think is one of the worst and most abhorrent decisions in the history of the United States. So I just want to be clear on this. Let me give you all a chance to weigh in on this. When we have a decision that is absolutely morally abhorrent, Korematsu, Dred Scott, we can go down the line. Should officials who disagree with a morally abhorrent decision just blindly follow it, or do they register their disagreements? I suppose if they have to, they resign and protest. I mean, there's a system for this, there's a pattern for this, but is the United States of America better off if our public officials, in the face of grievous moral wrong, say and do nothing? Mr. Sauer?
I strongly agree, Senator Hawley, with your reaction to that. And the only point I was trying to make in my exchange with the ranking member was it's hard to make a very blanket, sweeping statement about something without being presented with the facts and the law that apply to that particular scenario. So those historical examples, I think, are designed to illustrate the difficulty of doing that.
Mr. Wright, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you for your background and also for teeing up that question. I stand by my earlier comments, which is to say that there is no hard and fast rule about whether in every instance a public official is bound by a court decision. There are some instances in which he or she may lawfully be bound and other instances in which he or she may not lawfully be bound.
Well, certainly I know that everybody sitting on this panel in front of me is a firm believer in the rule of law. It just seems that to me, we can multiply these instances. The Fugitive Slave Act, for example. And we had numerous judges and other public officials when the Supreme Court said that the fugitive slave law, an absolutely abhorrent law, had to be enforced in the North. You had multiple judges who said, I can in good conscience enforce this. Many of them then resigned. The United States might be a better place if more of them had done so and had taken a stand firmly against such injustice. So I can't believe that it's the position of anybody on this committee that in the face of decisions like Korematsu and Dred Scott and the Fugitive Slave Act that we should say to people, oh, just grin and bear it, don't say anything, enforce the law, for heaven's sake. I mean, good heavens. Ms. Dillon, let me ask you, you spoke very movingly about religious liberty, and it made me think of that line that America didn't invent religious liberty invented America. And your family's story is certainly a testament to that. I also am mindful of the fact that in the last 4 years, we have seen unprecedented attacks on religious liberty in this country. Absolutely abhorrent attacks on people of faith. Just to take one example, after the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, 100 pregnancy care centers, more than that, were vandalized, criminally assaulted, firebombed. Over 300 churches, many of them Catholic churches, were targeted in the same manner. The Biden Justice Department did nothing to defend these institutions. They let them twist in the wind. They allowed the violence to go on virtually unchecked. And indeed, members of this body encouraged this kind of violence with outrageous, irresponsible rhetoric on the floor of the United States Senate and on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. My question to you is, will you commit to stopping the disparate treatment of Americans on the basis of religious faith that we have seen in the last 4 years? Will you make sure that people of faith are protected in the religious expression of their most deeply held beliefs?
Thank you for that question, Senator Hawley. I believe my career and the disclosures made to the Senate would back up the fact that my entire career in 32 years has included religious liberty litigation on the side of people of faith, of minority and majority faiths. And I'm very proud of that, and I've won cases at the United States Supreme Court defending people of faith from government tyranny and obstruction. And so I would absolutely be committed as a top priority in the Civil Rights Division, if confirmed, to defending people of faith equally.
Very good. And will you investigate and, where it's warranted, prosecute those who carry out attacks on pregnancy care centers, places of worship, those who with religious or maybe it's anti-religious motivation target people of faith in their houses of worship and other places where frankly they're quite vulnerable?
Absolutely, Senator. I don't think there's any question about that.
Good. Let me ask you about anti-Semitism on America's campuses. You referenced this, I think, in your opening statement. Since October 7th of 2023, we've seen the most horrific explosion of anti-Semitic violence. Just yesterday, I met in my office with a young man, a student at DePaul University, an ROTC member. He's also Jewish. He's a Jewish American. His arm was in a sling because he had been physically assaulted on his campus. What was his offense? He had been tabling in support of the state of Israel. Will you commit to vigorously enforcing, Ms. Dillon, Title VI violations related to anti-Semitism to make sure that we root out this scourge on America's campus?
If you want to briefly
Absolutely, Senator. I would certainly commit to that.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.